Hi everyone, and welcome to Module 4, part of our investigation stage on what I need to know, and really focusing on dreaming up a project. So let's recap a little bit. In Module 3, you had to create a driving question. So hopefully your driving question, or at least some of you might have had multiple questions that you're like, hey, I think this might be an idea, or this might be another idea. Your driving question should again have some framing words, decide or who it's for in terms of we, an organization, I, some type of actions or challenges, and that can be multiple ones, and then who ultimately is the audience. Who is it solving a problem for, or how is it affecting another person, whether it's you, your family, your school, the community. And so with your driving question, we are at the point where it is time to have one. So if you haven't already decided on one, I know some of you had a couple driving questions and you weren't sure. Now's the time to pick. What is a driving question that you can choose that's going to really steer your project, that's going to allow you to dive deeper into the concepts you're learning with your community partner, as well as demonstrate your work. So if you haven't already done this, now's the time to take a step back, maybe look at Module 3 or the third slide in this Google slide, and really formulate your driving question. Your driving question does not need to be perfect at this point. It's okay if it's still a little rough. It might even change a little bit as you're going through this process of investigating your project, looking and researching more about concepts that are with your community partner or that you're learning with your community partner. And so again, your driving question doesn't need to be perfect, but you need to have only one, not just a bunch of ideas at this point. So please have your driving question ready as you start Module 4. Once we have our driving question, and now we have our community partner, we are going to merge the concepts together to start our investigation. However, it's not just something where I have my driving question, I have my community partner, boom, in a week I'm going to have my project and it's done. Your driving question is a huge part of your project. Yes, your community partner is a huge part of your project as well, because you're learning concepts through that community partner. But it's not just something that you're going to throw together in one night or a few days. It's definitely something that's going to be a process. And that's what we're really hoping you're getting from this project-based learning. So it's a little bit different than probably what you might be used to with a project where I just quick learn about a few concepts. I complete something, or I make something and I'm done. We really want to assess the process of how am I understanding this information? What purpose does it serve? And hopefully answering those big why questions. So let's really take a look at this investigation process. So we have our community partner topic. We have our driving question. There are probably things that you already know about your topic or that are related to your driving question. Next, as we travel through the semester of learning, you might have already even started learning new concepts through your community partner. You may have done some additional research. As you're going through this semester, you're going to be learning more concepts. You may be doing additional research. Maybe you're working on something that requires you to do additional research or helps you understand that big why is this important to learn about this. Maybe it's a specific skill that you're working with for your PE class and you're like, why is that important? Like, my trainer said it was really important, but really what purpose does it serve, or how is it really creating a healthy living environment for me? So maybe you have to do a little bit additional research than just a quick chat with your community partner. It might have to go a little bit deeper than that, depending on what kind of questions you might have. So you might have a lot of learned or new concepts that you've learned. So new concept learned, research to support my project goals. Those might pop up as you're learning the new concepts. You might have, or these little questions marks. Maybe you have more questions that spawn up or pop up as you're learning concepts, as you're doing research. And that's okay. As long the process of this semester, it's okay that you're having more additional questions. That's a good thing. That means you're really thinking about what impact your project is having. And then ultimately, we're hoping that with that research and with those new learned goals, that you can then put it into a project to demonstrate what you've learned and ultimately explain why you learned that. So, with thinking about that, this module 4 is really thinking about or really focusing on things I need to know. And this is going to be an area you're going to have an assignment in Schoology, but this is going to be an area where you're going to come back to this multiple times. You're going to come back on what are things I need to know. For some of you, you might be like, I'm not really sure what I need to know because I don't really know anything. It's hard to pinpoint things I need to know without knowing ahead of time, right? Or at least that's what I always feel like. Well, how do I not know what I don't know? That's kind of those double negatives. But at least we can maybe guess on some things that I probably might need to know a little bit more about this. If anything, I need to know why. Why is this important to me? And I might have to, that might come from directly me in my reflection. But again, everything in the yellow is things that I'm going to have to investigate or learn. And it's going to be something that's going to pop up throughout the semester. It's not just going to be something that pops up in the very beginning of working with my community partner. I have a feeling that these are things that all the way through the semester, you're going to be asking yourself, you're going to be looking for. So that way you can really dive deep into the idea of your project, really answer those. Why is it important to me? Why do I want to know this? Um, and hopefully, as you're starting to answer this yellow area, it's starting to answer or be able starting to answer, and then you'll be able then to demonstrate what you have learned in a very layered way. So what does that look like as an example? Let's look at this next slide. So if I had an example of, let's say I was taking a quilting class with Miss Quincy, and my driving question, let me move this down a little bit so you can see. Oops, sorry. My driving question is right here. How does quilting engage people to art, community, and history? So that's my driving question. And my project, in my mind, I knew I was going to create a quilt. And so as I started thinking about what my focus might be, I started adding to my project over here as far as writing it down like, hey, I think my project is going to be um, an old schoolhouse near my cottage. So even though my driving question doesn't talk about the old schoolhouse, it does talk about the skills that I'm going to be learning with Miss Quincy. And it uses the word engage people because it's going to reference back to something that actually exists in our community. And so, some things that I know about quilting. I know some basic quilting patterns. I know how to do a little bit of sewing. I know some history about 19th century quilting. I have a picture of the schoolhouse, and in my mind, at least, or written in my notes, I have the size of the quilt that I think I'm going to be able to make in the period of time that I have. So, along the way, at least right now, in the very beginning stage, I can think of some things that I am going to need to know about quilting and about this end project here, where I'm going to show a video or I'm going to show me creating this quilt and explaining how it engages the public on the history of what the schoolhouse looks like in comparison to what I create. So it might invoke a lot of questions by community members or my family who've seen the schoolhouse. It might uh, be a great comparison in terms of what they already know about what the schoolhouse looks like, and then forces me to reflect on my interpretation through my quilt as far as how I created the quilt and how I represented the schoolhouse. So I know that there's going to be lots of questions. And I know as I go through the process, I'm going to have to learn some sewing techniques. I know for a fact that my sewing skills are quite up to par. That's why I'm taking this quilting class with Miss Quincy. She's going to give me the skills or guidance on how to be a better quilter. I also know I'm going to need some history of the schoolhouse. If I'm going to do a schoolhouse and it's a specific real schoolhouse that I want to represent, I'm going to need that history. So I'm going to have to do some research. I'm also going to want to do history of quilts during that time period. So if this quilt or this schoolhouse was built during a specific time, I might want to also think about maybe my quilt is also has some specific techniques that I'm going to use that also incorporate that into the quilt for that time period of when the schoolhouse was. So if the schoolhouse was built in the 1800s, maybe I want to incorporate some of those skills into my quilt. I also want to need to know how to piece and cut specific quilt pieces together. So I have a feeling that this is going to be very intricate. I know that my quilting skills are very basic in terms of bigger pieces, and so I might have to know those finer skills. And I'm sure Mrs. Quincy has some actual techniques, sewing techniques and sewing lingo that go with that. But for right now, I know I'm going to have to figure out how to cut more delicate pieces. I'm also going to need to know what kind of binding I'm going to use for my quilt, if I'm going to embroider some of it to quilt it, to actually bind it, quilt it together, or what kind of insert I'm going to have to make it softer. So I'm going to need to know that kind of information. I'm also going to need to know how to do something like an understitch or invisible stitching. So to close out my quilt, I might even want to do some things by hand, especially if I'm learning about the history of quilts. And maybe there's some techniques that I will want to incorporate in my quilt. And if it's something that's historically accurate, I might want to incorporate those techniques in my quilting as well. And then of course, there's period correct prints for the time. So if it's something like the schoolhouse was built in the 50s, there's probably prints or replicated prints that would represent that time period. If it's something in the 1800s, there would be prints that are replicated as well that are indicative of those time periods. So I want to do some research of the time period as well. And then any other additional concepts about the art of quilting. There are books, tons of books about quilting that I'm sure Mrs. Quincy can't get to. I'm sure there's things about quilts, not only about the history, but the art of what quilting does. And I'm sure there's also some history about, just like with art history, there's probably some art history behind quilting as well. Like what kind of emotions does it invoke? What kind of patterns might mean certain things? And that also goes with the history of quilts. What techniques maybe are used that are time specific? So again, I'm going to definitely do some research. And as I start investigating this stuff, I know there's going to be more questions. I know I'm going to be able to change those questions and define them better, so, or refine them so that they're more specific to what I'm going to be working on. But right now, at least for module 4, I threw some questions out that I know I'm probably going to need to know, or at least at this point want to know. So that's an example of making a list of things that not only I know, but I need to know, and how it works with the process of investigating and how it's going to ultimately affect my project. So with the investigation process, building a project is a process. It takes time, reflection, and inquiry to create a well thought out project that truly dives deeper than what I'm learning by answering the question, why? And that ultimately answer the question, why am I learning this? I think that's a huge part. I mean, yes, it's great to learn stuff, but if you don't know why you're learning it, not just for the sake of, hey, it's fun, but like, is there a reason why I'm learning this? Why do I think it's fun? Why is it enjoyable for me? What kind of outlet is it providing if we're talking about like PE and physical and mental health? Those are things that we're hoping you get from your project. So as you start investigating your project or investigating for your project, you're going to move forward with your idea. You are going to stop, look, and reflect. So you're going to stop, take a look at what you are learning, and reflect, like, where does that go from here? What kind of questions do I have with that? What purpose does it serve to know about this stuff? Is it helping maybe us build on a skill I already have? Or is it something where I'm at least learning a new skill? That's where we do our stop, look, and reflect. Then I'm going to learn and investigate new ideas and concepts. So as I stop, look, and reflect, I might start learning more concepts. I might learn something the next week. I might start investigating new ideas or concepts. Maybe there's something that I want to ask my teacher or my community partner about. And that's where, after I stop, look, and reflect, I can really pinpoint those ideas. And then we're going to ask questions. Why is this important to me? Why is it important to my project, or in general to my main goals of my project? And again, you're going to stop, look, and reflect. So it's okay that it takes time. It's okay for you to say, why is this important? Not just for the sake of doing the project, not just for the sake of taking the class, but really, what am I learning? What are some of the concepts that I have learned, and why is that important? Why is it important to learn about various art techniques, or learn about the watershed, or learn about creating a healthy lifestyle? Why are those things important? And then as you stop, look, and reflect and keep continually asking questions, odds are, surprise, your reflection after learning new concept skills will continuously inspire new questions of how and why. So that's okay for you to keep asking those questions. Like if I'm learning about different concepts in or skills in ballet, why is that important? What is it supposed to do? What is it supposed to look like? I'm guessing there's reasons why there's different techniques in ballet. So again, it's okay to keep reflecting and asking those why questions. And then you'll just repeat the process as needed. And you will be, in essence, dreaming up or creating your project. So as you explore and investigate. So again, this will be a process that goes round and round. And that's what we're hoping for. We're hoping that it inspires more questions and make you wonder more about the topic that you're working with, or the topic that you are working with, or the person, community partner that you're working with. So in Schoology, there is an assignment, things I know or need to know. This will be a continuous process. So even though this is, when you get to this assignment, it'll be a Google Doc, you'll be able to reference this back. It's making a copy for you in your Google Drive. So you'll have an idea as you go through your investigation process, what are some things that I know, and then what are some new things that I need to know. So as we work through these modules, I might ask you, hey, go back to your what do I need to know list. Can you add to that? And so that's something that I might either have on that Google Doc or create that question list in my workbook that I might have for this course. And then some questions that you all had in the last modules. Well, why these baby steps? Can I just move on? The answer is yeah, to some extent. You don't need to wait for our modules to work on your project. Your project is with your community partner. Your project is what are you going to get from your community partner and out of the experience and opportunities. Each module, though, just helps guide you through the process, ensures that you are not only learning about the process, but also taking the time to reflect on those learning goals, your overall project, and any questions that might arise as you dive deeper into your project investigation. So some of you are like, I just, see the big picture, I'm going to make this project. But again, we want you to really think about the process of design. This is actually something that is a concept that is taught in many colleges as well as a lot of companies when they're creating new ideas or thinking about a project, is what process am I using? And I get we all kind of already do that inherently. We ask questions, but going through the steps really helps us identify key things that maybe we might miss if we were just, I have to do a project. So maybe you're not really sitting there thinking about the whys or what kind of other questions this might inspire. And so that's why we take the time to do these modules. So that way, if you've never done project-based learning, this is a introductory course on, or this is an introductory skill on how to really formulate a good project, to make it rigorous, to make it worthwhile, to make sure that you're diving in deeper and really getting a better understanding of your topic or working with your community partner. If you're someone that has done project-based learning, this is a great way to extend or sharpen those skills. Take the opportunity to dive in deeper, ask questions, maybe think about it in a larger sense than maybe what you're doing right now. So again, this process isn't just a tiny process in a box. It's not just hey, I make a PowerPoint for my project and I'm done. I quickly do a few lessons and we're good to go. But really, it's about asking those questions and thinking about how you can expand your learning experience. So you should be working on developing your project. So even if you are done with all the modules, you can continuously be working on developing a project by learning new concepts. I would guess that whether you're working with a community partner or working on building a kit or working with a group as your community partner, you're developing and learning new concepts. Documenting your work. So if you're building something, you might want to start documenting your work, taking pictures of you building it. If I was building my quilt with, or creating my quilt with Mrs. Quincy, I would be documenting my work. I'd be taking pictures, laying out my patterns, having just sketches in my sketchbook about what my process is doing. And so that way, at some point, when I have to create or demonstrate what I've learned, I can use and draw those artifacts with me. And I don't have to go back. It's something that I'm continuously thinking about, like, hey, yeah, I do need to probably create a plan for my quilt. I'm going to need to, or I want to show people like what was the process for my quilt making, or at least for my purpose, say, wow, I've come a long way with my quilt. So whether you're taking pictures, journaling, taking a video, taking notes or doing notes, creating pieces. So if you're working with an art teacher, maybe you're creating pieces along the way. And at the very end, you're going to create a big portfolio or do a larger scale piece that maybe incorporates a couple concepts. So that's, again, something that you can be working on as you're working through your project. And then finally, doing research to help support or answer the why to your questions. So maybe I'm doing quilt, but again, I'm going to have to do research about time period, about uh, maybe time period correct fabric, not just the technique of quilting. Maybe just research. What about the art of quilt making are there? I'm sure there's lots of information about the actual art and technique of quilt making and how it invokes and engages the public when we make those quilts and the history behind that. And so again, yes, you can move on in terms of your project. Your project is something that you should be working on from the minute you paired up with your community partner to when we end. And that's something that you can dive deeper, make it the experience more enhanced, take advantage of the opportunities that you have with your community partner, or at least we're hoping that you are, and really, again, following up with any questions or concepts or additional concepts you want to learn. So we are going slow as far as the baby steps through the modules, but the actual process you can continue to build as you work through your project. If you have any questions, be sure to ask, and I hope everything is going good. And thanks for listening to Module 4.